He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. Well, we had a second day of oral arguments in the Supreme Court. I'm not going to spend the entire program on this, but I want to help unravel this for you. The Defense of Marriage Act, passed by Congress in 1996, signed into law by Bill Clinton. Why was this law proposed, adopted by the overwhelming majority of Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate, and signed into law by a Democrat president? Here's Bill Clinton's signing statement. Throughout my life, I have strenuously opposed discrimination of any kind, including discrimination against gay and lesbian Americans. I'm signing into law H.R. 3396, a bill relating to same-gender marriage, but it is important to note what this legislation does and does not do. I've long opposed governmental recognition of same-gender marriages, and this legislation is consistent with that position. The Act confirms the right of each state to determine its own policy with respect to same-gender marriage and clarifies for purposes of federal law the operative meaning of the terms marriage and spouse. This legislation does not reach beyond these two provisions. It has no effect on any current federal, state, or local anti-discrimination law and does not constrain the right of Congress or any state or locality to enact anti-discrimination laws. I therefore would take this opportunity to urge Congress to pass the blah, blah, blah. This year, the Senate considered this legislation contemporaneously. Anyway, I also want to make clear to all that the enactment of this legislation should not, despite the fierce and at times divisive rhetoric surrounding it, be understood to provide an excuse for discrimination, violence, or intimidation against anyone. In all the discussion today, all the blog posts today, has anybody explained why this law was passed originally? Why both parties came together at the time? A mere 16 and a half years ago, with supermajorities in both houses, signed by Clinton. Does anybody remember why they did this? Isn't it important to remember why they did this? They did it, ladies and gentlemen, because it was becoming apparent that there was a litigation strategy taking place. That proponents of same-sex marriage were trying to get same-sex marriage approved by state courts and then impose those decisions on other states, and that the federal government, this case Congress and the President, decided that even though, as I explained yesterday, the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution, based on a 1930 Supreme Court decision, does not compel one state to violate its own fundamental policies to adopt another state's legislation, another state's laws. They wanted to make sure in Congress that that would not happen. They didn't want the litigation strategy going through the state courts and the federal courts to impose on states that did not adopt same-sex marriage to have to comply with same-sex marriage policies and laws in other states. That was the original purpose of the Defense of Marriage Act. That's what Clinton was talking about. It's not about discrimination because he said that you cannot discriminate, and he would insist that we not discriminate against anybody for any unconstitutional reason. So for the purposes of the federal government stepped in to try and ensure that one state could not impose its will on another state through its state's judiciary, and that under federal law, that the feds would only recognize in its various statutes and so forth traditional marriage. Somehow this has turned into a federalism issue. Even some conservatives, it's a federalism issue. Well, how is it a federalism issue? I hear Justice Kennedy going on and on about states determine what marriage is. States determine what marriage is. Fine. And the states will continue to determine what marriage is if the Defense of Marriage Act is upheld. But the states will not determine what marriage is in terms of federal definitions when it comes to federal benefits and policies. Isn't it amazing how the left moves between centralized government and federalism? Here the left is insisting that the Defense of Marriage Act be knocked out on federalism grounds. And the day before they were insisting that the federal courts, including the Supreme Court, impose its will on the entire nation. That we cannot have one state or a handful of states defining marriage one way and the others defining it another way. The federal government has no role in defining marriage for the states. The federal courts had no role, the federal district court, the Ninth Circuit Court, and yes, the Supreme Court, in telling the people of California how they can and cannot vote on a proposition like Proposition 8. For reasons I explained at length yesterday. Today, I am saying that when the federal government passes a statute that in essence undergirds a Supreme Court decision from the 1930s that under the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution, one state cannot impose its policy demands on another state through its state court system, that's only rational, I would think. And that the federal government, for the federal government's purposes, not state purposes, but that the federal government can in fact define who is eligible for benefits when it comes to marriage. That's not a federalism issue. That's the federal government making a decision about its own entitlements and welfare state. Now, so the Defense of Marriage Act, the federal government didn't recognize same-sex marriages for federal purposes. If Congress wants to reverse course, then Congress can reverse course. It can do it tomorrow. And given the trend of this thing, given where this thing is moving, this issue, it may do so in the near future. Virtually the entire Democrat Party has now endorsed same-sex marriage. Now, it's stunning to watch this. They've done it literally in a period of months. Almost like a mob, really. Almost like a mob. But of course the federal government, via Congress and the president, signing this into law, should be able to define who's eligible for its benefits, whether it recognizes traditional or same-sex marriage. Was the federal Congress that outlawed polygamy. Here the federal government's not outlawing anything. Here the federal government is not insisting that the states adopt its view of marriage. What the federal government is saying is twofold. Number one, when it comes to federal benefits, federal policies, we recognize traditional marriage only. And I can tell you for certain that all these federal laws that have been passed over the years, whether it's Social Security, Medicare, you name it, it was always intended to be traditional marriage. Does that matter? Apparently not. That's number one. Number two, the federal government simply underscored by statute what the Supreme Court said in the 1930s about the full faith and credit clause, which is, as an example, the highest court in Massachusetts, in a 4-3 decision, recognizing same-sex marriage, which was extremely controversial at the time, and the state legislature objected, and the governor at the time objected, Romney. At the state Supreme Court in Massachusetts, a mere 4 individuals, it was a 4-3 vote, cannot impose on the state of South Carolina its will by defining marriage one way, and then people moving to South Carolina and insisting that it be upheld there when the state rejects it. Then what the federal government, the Congress was trying to do was to address that. But I like the way this is being, and I say this sarcastically, twisted and spun. This is a federalism issue. The federal government has no role in defining marriage, so the federal government can't even define marriage for the purposes of federal benefits? That's not federalism. That's crazy. Of course it can. Has the federal government not defined all kinds of things, even now in the United States military? Who can participate and who can't? Don't they even have clergy now who marry same-sex couples? I mean, I haven't kept up with it that closely. You see, what troubles me, folks, is this, and conservatives fall for this too. The complete rejection of a principled approach to republicanism. Not Republican Party, republicanism with a lowercase r. The process is very important. Who gets to decide what for what purposes? Who gets to decide what for what purposes? If the Supreme Court is truly interested in letting the system play out as it's supposed to under the Constitution, I can tell you right now, the 4 liberal justices, like liberal justices, activist justices before them, are going to seek to impose their will. This is who they are, that's what they are, that's how they think. Despotic. But I'm listening to Anthony Kennedy struggle, and I'm thinking to myself, what is he struggling about? What's the problem here? The states should decide this issue. The states will decide this issue. If the federal courts stay the hell out of it. As I explained yesterday. What's the federal role here? What is the federal role? And then today, when the Congress passes a law and the president signs it, creating a federal role for the definition of marriage for the purposes of federal benefits and federal law, not state benefits and state law, how is that a violation of federalism? When the federal government underscores what the Supreme Court did in the 1930s, a rational, originalist interpretation of the full faith and credit clause, that is, that one state can impose controversial laws and policies on another state that violate that other state's positions. How is that a violation of federalism? That's a protection of federalism. You know, folks, I might be a single voice in the wilderness here. I'm starting to wonder. I might be a single voice in the wilderness here. I bet I am. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
All right, folks, we will play a few clips after the bottom of the hour of of some of the justices back and forth, because we don't get insight into this too often, and it's pretty fascinating regardless of the subject matter. But I don't find this as complicated from a litigation point of view as some apparently do. One of the benefits I guess I have behind this microphone is I've litigated and I understand the Constitution and these processes, but that aside, you just look at the situation. The situation is a federal district court in California where the judge was biased, not because of who he is, but what he did. The judge wanted to throw out Proposition 8. The Ninth Circuit Court, which is extremely left-wing, wanted to do the same thing, but the Democrat establishment there, the Attorney General, refused to defend the statute, the proposition, Proposition 8. That's a dereliction of duty. And when you think about it, we have a Democrat Attorney General, now the governor of California, who refused to defend the decision of the people on Proposition 8, and we have a Democrat President of the United States who refuses to defend a statute that was duly passed by a prior Congress and signed by a prior president. Now, if this is the way it works, where presidents can pick and choose what laws they're going to enforce, well, I'm glad they told us. So what was all the hubbub when Richard Nixon was impounding funds and decided that he wasn't going to spend the money that Congress passed? Why was that one of the issues that they felt on the left, Hillary Clinton among others, that they would impeach Nixon over? If a president has an independent judgment on what is or is not constitutional, if a president can defy precedent going all the way back to Marbury versus Madison, and I'm not saying he should or shouldn't, I'm just saying if that's now the reasoning, then I just want you leftists to understand that this will apply to us too. Although I know full well that you'll call for impeachment or the resignation of any president or attorney general who's a conservative who tries this. But it is amazing to me, by hook or by crook, the left advances its cause. By election, by fiat, whether administrative or judicial, they advance their cause. It doesn't matter how or when or how. It's full speed ahead at all times. I'll be right back.
Is that a copy of the Constitution you've got? Or are you just happy to see Mark Levin? Call him now at 877-381-3811.
By the way, next hour I have an absolutely remarkable audio. I mean, I was stunned by this audio of Bill O'Reilly on the Fox News Channel. Absolutely stunned by this audio and what this man had to say. The man who's been railing against secular progressives, talks about the culture warriors. I couldn't believe it, how he disparaged tens of millions of people. I'll get to that in the next hour. But this issue, can the federal government define marriage for the purpose of federal law, for the purpose of federal benefits, for the purpose of federal policies? And if the federal government does that, that somehow that violates a state's power to do the same with respect to state law and state policies, it just seems to me to be ridiculous. Of course the federal government can do that. And can the federal government also say, look, by statute, we just want the world to know that we uphold the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution, and we, in essence, support what the Supreme Court did 70, 80 years ago. Suddenly, this is controversial. Suddenly, Anthony Kennedy's having brain spasms over it. Let me give you some examples. Here's Chief Justice John Roberts. And then later you'll hear Justice Kennedy intervene. talking to the Attorney General of the United States. Or I should say, the Solicitor General. Excuse me. Cut 5, go.
You agree that Congress could go the other way, right? Congress could pass a new law today that says we will give federal benefits. When we say marriage in federal law, we mean committed same-sex couples as well. And that could apply across the board. Or do you think that they couldn't do that?
We think that wouldn't raise an equal protection problem like this statute does.
Stop right there. See, this has nothing, his question has nothing to do with equal protection. Under the 14th Amendment, under the Constitution, for that matter, any other part of the Constitution. It has nothing to do with equal protection. He is saying under the Defense of Marriage Act, you all are telling us that the federal government can't define marriage. Well, if the federal government defines marriage to include same-sex marriage, you all would think that's perfectly right. Right? Nothing to do with equal protection. He didn't ask him about equal protection. Go ahead, Mr. Producer.
My point is, you don't think it would raise a federalism problem either, do you?
I don't think it would raise a federalism problem, but the key for our purposes is that in addition to denying these fundamentally important benefits, is who they're being denied to.
Stop. He's still not answering the question. He still didn't answer the question. How can it be that the federal government can define marriage as same-sex and other sex marriage, and that's okay, but if the federal government defines it a way in which this fellow doesn't like, the Solicitor General, that's not okay? Again, putting aside equal protection, that's not what he asked him about. Go ahead.
To be clear, you don't think there's a federalism problem with what Congress has done in DOMA?
No, we don't, Mr. Chief Justice. The question is what is the constitutionality for equal protection purposes, and because it's unconstitutional and it's embedded into numerous federal statutes, those statutes will have an unconstitutional effect, but it's the equal protection violation from the perspective of the United States. Stop
there. Now, the reason Roberts is focusing on this, I don't give him any credit, I'm just explaining it, is because he knows this is a bugaboo with Anthony Kennedy. Anthony Kennedy is looking to find a federalism reason to strike down the Defense of Marriage Act, and he might be the fifth or sixth vote to do that. That's why Roberts is focused in on this. And so speaks up next Justice Kennedy. Go ahead.
Congress can use its powers to supersede the traditional authority and prerogative of the states to regulate marriage in all respects. Congress can have a uniform definition of marriage that includes age, consanguinity, et cetera, et cetera.
No, I'm not saying that, Your Honor. I think if Congress passed such a statute, then we'd have to consider how to defend it.
Well, then there is a federalism interest at stake here. But I thought you told the Chief Justice there was not.
Well, with respect to Section 3 of DOMA, the problem is an equal protection problem.
All right, let me stop you right there. So he's going back to equal protection, which he has to do because he's boxed in. Now, this is really Kennedy and Roberts talking to each other through the Solicitor General. And I have a question for Justice Kennedy. I will ask it rhetorically. You wrote the opinion in the Lawrence case. You wrote the opinion in the Lawrence case. At least 4 of you justices reached down into Houston to get a very bizarre case, a very odd case, and you used that case to write an opinion. You did, Associate Justice Kennedy, which stands for the proposition that sodomy, that same-sex sodomy, is a constitutionally protected act. That's what you did. You didn't talk about federalism. You didn't give a damn about federalism. Even though in state after state after state those laws were being repealed. It was a fluke, this case, an absolute fluke. You didn't say a damn thing about federalism then, Justice Kennedy, did you? No, you didn't. You found a constitutional right protecting a sex act. Now, you wonder if the Defense of Marriage Act, which is a law passed by Congress to apply to federal laws and federal policies, not state laws and state policies. States are still free to pass their own laws as applies to marriage. That's what Bill Clinton said when he issued his statement signing the Defense of Marriage Act. He said, with respect to same-gender marriage, and each state will still have the right to determine its own policy with respect to same-gender marriage, and clarifies for purposes of federal law the operative meaning of the terms marriage and spouse. So now, Justice Kennedy, now you can see what happens when masterminds get caught up in their own illogic. Justice Kennedy, without any constitutional basis whatsoever, took the position he took in the same-sex sodomy case several years ago in the case called Lawrence. Now he's stuck. But he doesn't want to rule for the entire nation that same-sex marriage is a federal constitutional right, because damn knows you might have riots in the streets or some kind of cultural civil war in this country. They don't want to be responsible for that. They don't like the marches every year on abortion and so forth, so they're trying to avoid it. The problem is Kennedy is inconsistent. This has nothing to do with federalism. The Defense of Marriage Act doesn't stop Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, from recognizing same-sex marriage. It doesn't stop any state that passes it or adopts it from doing so. It says when it comes to federal law, we don't recognize it. When it comes to federal policies, we don't recognize it. And when it comes to one state that does recognize it, trying through litigation to impose it on another state, we just want to make it as clear as we can that we, the federal Congress, we, the President of the United States as well, take the position that the full faith and credit clause does not allow one state to do that to another, as the Supreme Court itself has ruled. I'm trying to make this as straightforward as I know how, ladies and gentlemen. If you stick with me, I'm repeating it enough so you can see what your Supreme Court is debating right now. Now, Justice Scalia, they appointed a law professor to argue the issue of procedure, whether they're standing or not standing. Justice Scalia takes on this issue of federalism with this particular professor who's arguing on procedural grounds that there's no standing and the case should be dismissed on that basis. Cut 6, go.
All these statutes use the term marriage, and the federal government says in all of these statutes, when it says marriage, it includes same-sex couples, whether the state acknowledges them to be married or not.
But I don't know if that would work, because they wouldn't be...
Never mind whether it will work. I don't care if it works. Does it create a federalism problem?
The power to marry people is a power that rests with the states. The federal government doesn't issue marriage licenses.
No, it's not doing that. It's just saying for purposes, just what it's doing here. It says for purposes of all these federal statutes, when we say marriage, we mean, instead of saying we mean heterosexual marriage, we mean, whenever we use it, heterosexual and homosexual marriage. That's what it says. Can it do that?
As long as people were validly married under state law and met the requirements of state law.
That's not the point. That's not his point. Validly married or not, whether it works or not. He is saying, what do you mean the federal government can't say for purposes of our laws and policies, we, the federal Congress, we, the federal executive branch, will only recognize traditional marriage? What do you mean that violates some state law or federalism or what have you? It's the federal government policing the federal government. How can that be a federalism problem? That's what he's saying, and of course he's right. Go ahead.
No.
I'm not sure that the federal government, if this answers your question, Justice Scalia, I'm not sure that the federal government could create a new federal marriage that would be some kind of marriage that states don't permit.
All right. The reason the liberals and Kennedy and the others are having problems with this is because they don't want to address it, because if they address it, they reveal how obtuse they have been on this issue of federalism and centralized government. The federal government is not creating a new definition of marriage that applies in every town and city and county and state. The federal government's not issuing marriage licenses. The federal government's not saying who can issue marriage licenses. The states are completely left alone. All the federal government has done is passed a statute saying, when it comes to us in the federal government, we define marriage for the purposes of receiving benefits, for the purposes of our policies, as a man and a woman. If they don't describe it that way in Massachusetts, so be it. In Vermont, so be it. In New York, so be it. But for purposes of federal benefits, federal entitlements, federal law, we are not required to recognize what Massachusetts, Vermont, and New York have done. And of course that's true. Of course it's true. Moreover, Massachusetts, Vermont, and New York, you are not free through your courts to impose your will on Alabama and Pennsylvania and this state and the other state. That is a well-understood interpretation of the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution. That's it. That's it.
Mark Levin.
See, the liberal activists on the court, they already know what they're going to do. They've already been signaled. They've been signaled what to do. Kagan is a political hack. She sits on the court. She'll do whatever needs to be done. But so are the other liberal activists. Justice Sotomayor, talking to Paul Clement, who was hired by the House to defend the Defense of Marriage Act. Let's hear how this goes. Cut 3, go.
What gives the federal government the right to be concerned at all at what the definition of marriage is? Sort of going in a circle. You're saying we can create this special category, men and women, because the states have an interest in traditional marriage that they're trying to protect. How do you get the federal government to have the right to create categories of that type based on an interest that's not there, but based on an interest that belongs to the states?
Stop. This is a bizarre question. Mr. Producer, open your microphone, would you? Do we have a federal government?
Yes.
Does it pass federal laws?
Yeah.
Does it set federal policies?
Yes.
Do those laws and policies involve often the definition of marriage? Yes, of course. Social Security, all kinds of benefits are determined. Is not our federal tax code? Does that not have provisions that determine what your rates will be or what deductions you have, whether you're married or not? Of course. All right, thank you, Mr. Producer. So, Justice Sotomayor, what do you mean, what concern does the federal government have in defining marriage? If it doesn't have any concern in defining marriage, then why the hell are certain people penalized under the tax code and certain people benefit under the tax code, depending on whether they're married or not? The federal government has a big role in marriage. The federal government outlawed polygamy way back when, and your court upheld it. The issue is whether the federal government is imposing its decision on the states, which it clearly is not. It's not defining marriage for the states. And what's amazing, when a question like this is asked by somebody like Sotomayor or Ginsburg or Breyer, what's the other one, or Kagan, you know damn well that they want one definition of marriage determined by the Supreme Court, imposed on the entirety of the nation. That's what they want, and yet they make these cockamamie arguments like they're concerned about federalism. Since when? They don't even know what federalism means, apparently. The federal government, can it create these kinds of categories? Well, gee, I don't know. Is that your position on the affirmative action cases, Justice Sotomayor? Can the federal government create those categories and 1,000 other categories that the federal government creates, whether it's Congress, the president, or you? Or you, Madam Justice. Of course, the federal government, for the purposes of federal law, can define what marriage means. It's not imposing its will on state law or state policy. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. It's hour 2. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. I'm going to prove in part my point. This lady, I don't know her first name, Professor Ms. Kaplan, she was asked by the court to raise some issues that the court would consider or reject that were not briefed by the parties. And you'll remember she's going on the Defense of Marriage Act, that the states need to make these decisions, that the states have to decide what marriage means. The states. These liberal professors don't really believe this. It's just, if they're losing at the federal level, then it's the states. If they're losing at the state and federal level, then it's the courts. If the Constitution doesn't give them what they want, then you want to look at foreign law. You know, the left tells us what they want to do every day in every way. They want to institutionalize their agenda within the Constitution. That's what they want. So it becomes immune from the political process. They want to institutionalize their agenda. Those of us who reject that doesn't mean we endorse majoritarianism. It doesn't mean we believe people should be able to vote on our unalienable fundamental rights. That's not the point. The point is we have processes in place, and you can't say 3 strikes and you hit a home run when 3 strikes and you're out. You can't say I hit a ground ball, so I hit a home run. You can't say I popped up, so I hit a home run. In other words, you don't always get to hit a home run. You don't always get to change the rules. But Chief Justice Roberts, in a little back and forth with Professor Kaplan, keep in mind it was Kaplan who was arguing, the states need to decide this. The Defense of Marriage Act infringes on states' rights. Yes, liberals arguing for states' rights. Cut 7, go.
You don't doubt that the lobby supporting the enactment of same-sex marriage laws in different states is politically powerful, do you?
With respect to that category, that categorization of the term for purposes of heightened scrutiny, I would, Your Honor. I don't.
Really?
Yes.
As far as I can tell, political figures are falling over themselves to endorse your side of the case.
The fact of the matter is, Mr. Chief Justice, is that no other group in recent history has been subjected to popular referenda to take away rights that have already been given or exclude those rights the way gay people have.
Now, this is interesting. Now, that back and forth, I don't want to get into the weeds, is over these different levels of scrutiny that the court has concocted as applies to the Equal Protection Clause. But let's put that aside. Because what this really reveals is that this liberal professor doesn't believe in federalism, does she? She really doesn't believe the state should have a say, does she? She just said the fact of the matter is, Mr. Chief Justice, is that no other group in recent history has been subjected to popular referenda to take away rights that have already been given or exclude those rights the way gay people have. Agree or disagree with her point? The point is she rejects states' making these decisions through referenda, if that is the system they have. States like California, Proposition 8, she really doesn't think this matter should be left to the states, unless she wins in the states. She really believes the federal government should make this decision, whether it's Congress, whether it's a presidential fiat, or whether it's a judicial fiat. All she cares about is winning the political issue. And that's the problem with jurisprudence today. That's all those 4 left-wing activist justices care about, too. Do you think for 2 seconds Justice Sotomayor, Justice Ginsburg, Justice Kagan, or Justice Breyer give a damn about so-called states' rights? Of course not. They want the court to impose its will. Whether they, twist into a pretzel the Equal Protection Clause, or use foreign law, or distort the facts, or whatever they do. That's what they want. And this professor, who was arguing 3 minutes earlier for federalism, just denounced it. Just denounced it. Because, folks, what we've been talking about here for years, the Constitution means nothing to the left. Nothing. It's an impediment. As I've explained, as I've written, particularly in my latest book, Ameritopia, a constitutional system, a constitutional republic cannot coexist with the statists' utopian advances. Because the division of powers under our Constitution, the division of powers between different levels of government, within the federal government, which is key to preventing the concentration of authority, the centralization of government, the greatest fear that our founders and framers had, is key to advancing the utopian agenda. Same-sex marriage is viewed as righteous. And so it really doesn't matter what process we use. It really doesn't matter if arguments are inconsistent or even incoherent. It must be imposed on the population, whether the population likes it or not. Can't have them voting in referenda. You heard the professor. And we're not going to allow states, really, to make these decisions finally, are we? No. It's like Obamacare. The issue wasn't really whether the Commerce Clause applies to what the Democrats and Obama had concocted, this monstrosity. The issue wasn't the tax clauses. It had absolutely nothing to do with that. All the factual history, all the evidence demonstrated it wasn't a tax per se, but the Congress treated it as a penalty. The Congress that wrote it, the president who signed it, said, no, it's not a tax, it's a penalty. And one justice says, I've decided it's a tax because I don't want to strike it. Because I believe in this part of utopia. They do not accept the limits placed on them by the United States Constitution. It is that simple, and that's how destructive these people are. We have justices who do. Scalia and Thomas and Alito and who else? No. My mind. Kennedy sometimes. And Roberts, boy, did he blow it. He's demonstrated that on any given day he does or doesn't. But those three justices in particular, they understand what their role is. That the only role a Supreme Court justice has is to try and determine what the original meaning, the original intent of the Constitution was, and how it applies to current circumstances, and whether it applies to current circumstances. See, folks, the framers of the Constitution didn't say that every single matter that involves society is subject to standing and adjudication by the Supreme Court. Read the Constitution. The Supreme Court doesn't even have that much authority. There is no way the states would have ratified such a Constitution, and they didn't. But what has happened for the last 120 or so years with the rise of progressivism, which is an import from Europe, a brand of Marxism, socialism, has been, and the aim has been to destroy, to disassemble the Constitution. You don't have to take my word from it. I explained it in Ameritopia. I quote Woodrow Wilson. I quote others. This is what they say. Look, this Constitution, and we got these balances, and we can't function this way. Therefore, we won't. We have law professors who say, throw out the Constitution. We have law professors who say, change the 14th Amendment. None of it by, incidentally, amending the document, all through judicial fiat. And Breyer and Sotomayor, Ginsburg, Kagan, they're of this school. Constitution, Smochstitution. They're of this school. People who take an oath to uphold the Constitution and really don't. Now, they'll refer to it really as camouflage for whatever they're trying to do. Or, if interpreting it legitimately helps their cause, they'll do that too. This is why they always demand follow precedent, rather than follow the Constitution. Because we have decades of this dreck, this precedent, where we're piling one activist decision on top of another. Which is why Anthony Kennedy today is incredibly confused. He's looking for a way out. But you see the point. This professor arguing the issue on DOMA should be left to the states, left to the states. When Roberts asked her, really a totally different context, on whether these people really deserve heightened scrutiny under the various levels of scrutiny under the Equal Protection Clause manufactured by the court, she blurted it out. And I suppose I'm the only one who caught it. Look at these damn states. Since when the hell do you vote on rights? Since when the hell should states be allowed to do that? Oops. I've been arguing federalism all day, and now all of a sudden I'm saying, why should the states decide these things? And yet, in her utter incoherence and hypocrisy, she was speaking for the four leftists on the court, wasn't she?
Mark Levin.
Bill O'Reilly on Fox News yesterday. I believe he had as his guest. Was this on his show or Megyn Kelly's show? He had Megyn Kelly on the O'Reilly Factor. And I heard this today and I really couldn't believe it. It sounded like Barack Obama with his clinging to their guns and religion line. Cut 8, go.
For example, I had an interview with Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council. What is it about calling a gay union marriage that offends you? How does it hurt a traditional or heterosexual marriage?
Let's stop right there a second. Now, Megyn, you know better than this. And I think you're great. Are you aware, Megyn, that every major religion on the face of the earth, Judaism, Christianity, although there are offshoots, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, They all reject same-sex marriage. Are you aware of that? What do you mean, what tradition does it hurt? I mean, the question is, what tradition doesn't it affect? Whatever your opinion is of it, per se. Go ahead.
I didn't hear anything articulated that was particularly persuasive. What people go back to...
And I agree with you 100%.
Right.
100%. And I hate to say this to Kelly. And next week I got something to Kelly that she's not going to like.
Oh.
I agree with you 100%.
Wow, okay.
The compelling argument is on the side of homosexuals. Mm-hmm. That's where the compelling argument is. We're Americans. We just want to be treated like everybody else. That is a compelling argument. And to deny that, you've got to have a very strong argument on the other side.
And the
other side hasn't been able to do anything but thump the Bible.
Thump the Bible? Have I thumped the Bible once? In an hour and a half on the air today? Have I thumped the Bible once? In 3 hours yesterday? But putting me aside, is that what you hear in front of the Supreme Court, Mr. O'Reilly? Do you hear some of the greatest litigators ever in front of the Supreme Court thumping the Bible? Are you paying attention to the arguments that are being made? You're a practicing Catholic. Have you heard what your priests have had to say, and all the way up to the Pope? You heard those arguments? And there are many other arguments, too. Now, you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to like them. But what's this thump the Bible stuff? Why are you putting down your audience? I thought you stood for the folks. And you sound like Obama with the clinging to their guns and religion line. You should show respect to your audience. You can disagree with your audience. You can disagree with traditional marriage. You can disagree with your own faith. But you don't advance your cause if you support same-sex marriage, Mr. O'Reilly, by trashing people who don't, by mischaracterizing them, by degrading them. Who does that to their audience? Didn't he write a book called Culture Warriors or something like that? I don't have all his books memorized. I'm trying to keep track of all the killing this one and that one books. But I'm very serious about this. You talk about secular progressivism. SPs, I think you call them. Based on what, Mr. O'Reilly? SPs, the culture war. I assume you're talking about morality. I assume you're talking about faith. I assume you're talking about tradition. Well, those people in your audience who you put down as Bible thumpers, I bet a lot of them feel misled by you and your books and your monologues. They're not Bible thumpers. Many of them are decent people who have a deep and abiding faith. Many of them may not even be that. They may just be people who disagree on the subject. You should think twice about it, Mr. O'Reilly. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin, the fact checker of the left. Call him now at 877-381-3811.
Well, there's a lot going on in this country, and one of the major issues that's taking place under the radar, out of public view, is this immigration issue. Now, first of all, one of the great experts on this issue is an old friend of mine, Senator from Alabama, Jeff Sessions. Senator Sessions, how are you?
I'm doing fine.
Well, I'm very concerned, first of all, that this administration, it's really grotesque. Jeff, you served in the Reagan administration. I served in we didn't sit there and try and figure out ways to inflict as much damage on the American people as possible when we didn't get our way. They're cutting $250 million from the Border Patrol, thereby cutting thousands of agents from doing their jobs and so forth, and they're saying it's due to the sequestration, and the head of the union at ICE is calling attention to this. What do you make of this?
Well, they had such an opportunity, President Obama did, to really by now to have demonstrated, after all the money that was really put in before he became president, you remember after 2007, and to make this border lawful and end the lawlessness. They have not done that. It's not under control, and it weakens very much any prospects for further legislation until we can demonstrate to the American people that we want to stop the lawlessness, and this reducing of personnel indicates a lack of will to get that job done.
Well, isn't that a point? I mean, in other words, whatever this gang of eight, and I'm so sick of this gang of this and gang of that. Aren't we supposed to have like a deliberative process so the American people can see what the hell's going on? But that said, doesn't this demonstrate that if the president, this administration is not going to secure that border and is going to look for every opportunity to play politics with it, what's the point of anything?
Absolutely. I tell you, that is a fundamental point. The head of the Immigration Customs Enforcement Group has voted no confidence in John Morton, their director, saying basically that he spends all his time promoting amnesty and undermining their ability to enforce the law. They've even sued him for blocking their ability to follow the law as they are sworn to do. So this administration is not doing what it could, and now it's asking us to trust them with massive legislation that would provide amnesty for millions, and trust us, we're going to deal with all the problems later.
I also like the way they fool with the numbers. That is, you hear them say, we've deported more illegals than ever before. And by the way, when he's on Spanish-talking radio and TV, he says the opposite. But we've deported more than ever before because they've changed the way they calculate these statistics. So if you're stopped on the border and released, that's counted as a deportation, whereas before it was not.
Right. They are manipulating numbers in that fashion, and the ICE people tell us that the burdens placed on them are making it virtually impossible to deport anybody unless they're convicted of a major serious felony crime. And this isn't, if you enter the country illegally and you're apprehended, you should be deported. We've got to deal with this situation honestly and long term, and it requires a great deal of work, and we could make progress, but I'm very, very worried that this secret gang meeting in secret is about to plop down a big bill. We have virtually no time in committee to examine it or have real in-depth hearings. Harry Reid said he wants to pass it right after the next recess, which is a Monday, beginning a week from Monday. Whoa. And he wants to have it done within that 3-week period.
He wants to pass, this bill could be 100 or 200 pages long. Maybe 1,000 pages long. He wants to pass this in 2.5-3 weeks?
What they're talking about doing, and ranking Republican on the Judiciary Committee, Grassley and Hatch and Lee and Cornyn, and we wrote to the chairman of the Judiciary Committee and asked about this. He intends to bring that up shortly after this recess is over, which will end a week from Monday, and it'll come out of committee, and Harry Reid says he wants to bring it right to the floor. And the American people need to be on guard about this, because they're saying good things that sound good about the bill, but just like in 2007, Mark, you remember they had a lot of good talking points, but when you read the language, it wasn't there. It wouldn't do what they promised. And it was a failure, and the American people rose up and stopped it. And I just have to say, I'm really worried, because their goal is to bring this bill up and move it forward before Mark Levin can tell everybody in the country what's in it.
You know, Senator
Sessions,
not
a healthy thing.
No, it's not. And, you know, I'm tired of laws being passed this way, whether it's Obamacare or Dodd-Frank or the stimulus or TARP. We the people have no idea what they're doing to us, do we? And you members of Congress, you don't have any idea what they're doing to us.
We have no idea. We were told this bill would have a strong biometric card in it. Now we're told, oh, that's going to be too expensive. We were told it would have the interim legalized people wouldn't be eligible for Obamacare, and all the costs that would go toward that. They voted my amendment down that would have held them to that on the budget. They don't intend to do that. This is a high-speed train. It's on track. They want to run it through. They don't trust the American people. But, Mark, the American people have been right on this issue for 30 years. They want a lawful system of immigration that's fair and just, that they can be proud of. And the special interest and the politicians are the ones who failed. They refuse to do so after being pleaded with by the American people. And the American people should be upset about this. What impact will these millions have on American jobs, wages? What impact will it be on our welfare and social programs? What are we going to do about the size and scope of this guest worker plan that the business groups and ag groups are all working on? What about visa overstays? All of these require hearings. We need to have months' worth of hearings publicly so the American people know what this is about before we try to ram this bill through, produced by a group of 8 senators, meeting in secret, self-appointed, good though they are. Even though I think they really want to do the right thing, this is not the right way to do legislation in America on something this important.
You know, Senator Sessions, Thomas Jefferson was in Paris, and he got a letter from his dear friend James Madison. A couple of months after the Constitutional Convention closed, and they were trying to get the states to ratify the Constitution. And Madison sends a copy of the draft to Jefferson in Paris, and is promoting it. And Jefferson said, in my language, Jefferson says, this is pretty good. There's a couple of real evils in here, and he mentions them. And then in a postscript, you know what he says? He says, one of the great evils here is that no bill should be voted on unless it's been engrossed for a full 12 months, and then only voted on if not a single word has been changed. And if it's an emergency, it should require 2/3 of both houses of Congress. I'm telling you what, that man was prescient.
Well, you are absolutely correct that the elected representatives of the people of the United States owe it to them to do their work in public, to lay out this bill in public, hear pros and cons about it from expert witnesses. You know, one group that's not in the negotiations and discussions, that's the leadership of the ICE group, the union group there, who've been openly critical of the gaps and problems with current law and the dangers we face, and they won't even talk to them. So the people who know what's happening are not involved. The American people and the pure interest of the American people is not being heard, I'm afraid. But you can be sure that the special interests are right in the middle of all the discussions.
Well, how can it be that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO are in on this, and senators like you're the ranking Republican on the damn Budget Committee? How is it possible that our elected representatives, for the most part, are cut out, but the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO are at the table? How does that happen?
Mark, think about it. They're openly saying, the bill's in trouble because the Chamber of Commerce and the unions haven't agreed yet.
Disgusting.
Who are these people?
I don't know.
Legislation, and we're supposed to just, like lemmings, go in and vote for it? Hardly with time to read it, and certainly not for the American people to digest the ramifications of it. Look, we need to do some things about immigration. We are a nation of immigrants. We do not dislike people who immigrate to America. We validate and value them, but we need a lawful system, one that we can be proud of. And I am just really worried that this train is being driven by a lot of cobbled-together special interest groups, and I don't think it's right.
Well, my attitude is if people don't know what's in this bill, then vote no. Vote no. This system is broken. Our deliberative process is broken. How can you have a representative republic when our representatives don't know what the hell's going on?
It's so much an attempt to avoid accountability. I think that's what the whole purpose of the Tea Party movement was.
Amen.
We want you guys to be accountable to us. You work for us. But how can they hold us accountable if things are done in the dead of night and rammed through with hardly any time for people to know what's in it? I think this continuing tendency to do this is weakening public respect for Congress. And I think they should be unhappy with us for these kind of things.
Well, Senator Sessions, always a pleasure. You're like the Paul Revere on this issue, and we're going to keep following it. And I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, God bless. He's a very earnest man, Jeff Sessions. Very earnest man. I've had it with the way that these laws are passed, ladies and gentlemen. That's reason enough to oppose him. And if I can get Marco Rubio on the program, I suspect he doesn't like this either. But I just want folks to understand on Capitol Hill, when this sort of stuff goes on, I personally, and I think millions of you too, I don't have a stomach for it anymore. They rammed that Obamacare through. We tried to stop it. One party rammed it through. Those members of Congress, many of them are now gone. We're left with it. Premiums going up, premiums canceled, long lines for doctors, all kinds of tumult, all kinds of upset. They didn't want us to know about it in advance. The same with immigration, the same with the financial systems in this country, how they're destroying them under Dodd-Frank. Thousands of pages in bills, tens of thousands of pages in regulations. Enough! Enough! This is a republic. All right, I want to tell you about Hillsdale College, folks. You've heard me talking about Hillsdale College's newest online course, American Heritage. If you've already registered and been watching the lectures, you know how much you can learn from Hillsdale about America's history and constitutional principles. Now, for those of you who've not signed up for a Hillsdale online course, I have a question. Why are you waiting? These courses are free, and they're archived for you to watch anytime. But first, you have to register. So go right now, please, to levinforhillsdale.com. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com to sign up for Hillsdale's newest online course, American Heritage. They're covering everything from America's founding and early years to the Civil War to the Progressive Era and the Reagan Revolution. Hillsdale's committed to a rebirth of liberty and learning in this country. That's why they're offering these courses. Join hundreds of thousands of your fellow Americans who are taking the courses. Go to levinforhillsdale.com right now. It's free, it's easy to register, and you can go through the courses at your convenience. That's levinforhillsdale.com. Go there right now, levinforhillsdale.com.
Mark Levin.
Let's see here. Let us go to Jay, Fort Worth, Texas, the great WBAP. Go ahead, sir.
Well, great to talk to you, and Senator Sessions is a tough act to follow, I must say.
Yes, he's good.
I'm gay, and I'm sort of hoping for gay marriage, but right. I'm not sure I want it to happen this way. And what made me think to say that, and I've thought about that all along, is that when you said that professor who was speaking in front of the court said something like, oh, gays are the most, you give stuff away and then you take it back or whatever, which may or may not be true. But what's right after that might be undocumented immigrants, meaning if I'm prepared to tolerate the easy way in for gay marriage, what's next? EPA, taking my backyard away? You follow?
Yes, because you understand that whatever the issue is, they all affect us. Some affect us more than others, like this issue affects you deeply. But the point is, it may be somebody's private property one day, it may be marriage another day, it may be abortion this day, something. We cannot have decisions made in a top-down, authoritarian, iron-fisted way. And, the reason isn't just because we don't get outcomes we want. It's because it is the heart and soul of tyranny. And so a handful of people who have the power to presumably give you rights have the power to take them away. And they will, because that's the history of history.
What occurred to me particularly is that the left, and I'm generally quite right of center, is always on the march for the next new cause. And once my cause, if you know what I mean by that, is done, they're off to the next cause. I'm no longer meaningful to them. The next cause is my backyard or animals, and I love animals just the way I'm sure you do.
Yes.
Or anything else. And my cause may have come out the way I want, but they couldn't care less. They're on the march for the next thing, and that next thing may not be the way I think laid out. I don't mean that it didn't go my way, but that it didn't play out fairly, whether or not it went my way.
Well, you're very thoughtful. You're very thoughtful and very principled, and that's important. All right, Jay, God bless you, my friend. You take care. Let us go to Daryl, Topeka, Kansas, on the Internet. Go.
Mr. Loren, thank you so much for taking my call.
Thank you.
Hey, I want to first thank Senator Sessions for coming on your program. But my concern is, why aren't these guys getting on the House floor and the Senate floor and railing against this stuff? Just like Rand Paul
All right, slow down. Sessions is railing against it. He's organized a number of senators on the Judiciary Committee, on other committees, on the floor of the Senate, to speak out against this. That's how I knew about it.
Well, thank God for that. But the Republican Party is starving for leadership. We are absolutely starving for leadership. And when we get someone like Rand Paul, look what happens.
Oh, I agree with you. I talked about it at the time, but you're exactly right. Look, here's what we need to do, and we can do it. We need to use, ready for this? Because I'm going to be quoted, and I've said it before, and I don't give a damn. We need to use political guerrilla tactics to slow down and stop the left. Whether it's policies coming out of the White House, out of the Senate, or out of the House, or out of various appendages and special interest groups, we need to throw, the political, what am I trying to say? Logs on the train tracks, politically speaking. We need to do these things. We need to slow them down and stop them, not negotiate with them, not meet them halfway. We need to slow them, stop them, beat them. That's what we need to do. Because if you, how do you negotiate with people who advance tyranny? How do you negotiate with people who are undermining our system? How do you negotiate with people who are destroying our finances? Answer, you don't. Enough of this political Neville Chamberlain crap. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Hour 3, our final hour. I'm Mark Levin. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. This Politico website is really a hack Democrat website. I see they're going after our buddy Louis Gohmert. It's pretty awful. It's just pretty awful. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, there is this problem of Obamacare. As you know, we've been keeping an eye on this for a long, long time. And, I heard Obama on a recent clip talking about now it's time to move on for immigration reform. And, we want folks to be able to go back and forth legally on the border and do this and do that. Are you as sick and tired as I am of Obama's serial lying? He really, really has no regard for we the people whatsoever. None. He thinks just because the drones who voted for him hang on his every word as if he's God himself, that the rest of us do. And we don't. I don't trust him. And he's demonstrated that he doesn't deserve to be trusted. He lied over and over again about Obamacare. He lied over and over again about the stimulus. Let me put it to you this way. Is there anything he said on a major issue or any major policy he's pushed that he hasn't lied about? The destruction this man is doing to our society won't be fully understood, won't be fully measured until he's long gone and out of office. But it's going to be severe. What kind of a person, what kind of a political party in the Democrat Party tampers with health care like this? When the vast majority of the people who did it never read the law, including the President of the United States, and yet insisted day after day that it be passed, that it would do good things, and on and on and on. This country, it's a runaway train. It's a juggernaut to the edge of the cliff. I mean, I'm collecting stories here day in and day out, left and right. It's just that they're piling up the disaster that this Obamacare is. And notice Obama never talks about it. Obama's being interviewed by Telemundo and Univision. He's interviewed by ABC and NBC and CBS. He's interviewed by this one and that one. Never held to account. I don't care if it's Benghazi or Obamacare or Dodd-Frank or anything else. He's on to the next issue. And that's how the statist works. Don't hold him to account for his promises. Don't hold him to account for his record. He's on to the next grand issue. Immigration. And after that, he'll be on to something after that. Now, Washington Examiner, Paul Bedard. Healthcare, I meant to get to this yesterday. Healthcare application registers voters too. Did you hear this one? The 61-page online Obamacare draft application for healthcare includes asking if the applicant wants to register to vote, raising the specter that pro-Obama groups being tapped to help Americans sign up for the program will also steer them to register with the Democrat Party. Who does this? Every little dictator south of the border. Every little dictator overseas. That's who operates this way. So Obamacare is another way to get voters, of course. It's another way to redistribute wealth. On page 59, after numerous questions about the applicant's identity and qualification for Obamacare, comes this question, quote, would you like to register to vote, unquote. The placement of the question could lead some to believe they have to register to vote to get health care. In the introduction of the document, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services declared, quote, this document, the questionnaire, represents each possible item that may need to be asked for successful eligibility determinations. In a letter to Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Supercilious, Representative Charles Bustani, Jr., Chairman of the House Ways and Means Oversight Subcommittee, said HHS is overstepping its bounds by a mile. This Kathleen Sebelius, the former left-wing Democrat governor of Kansas. I said 2 years ago, and I'll repeat it, she should be impeached. But she won't be, because of the genius who's the Speaker of the House. So Bustani says the draft documents wander into areas outside the department's purview and links applications for health insurance subsidies to voter registration. The position of the question could lead some to think voter registration is somehow tied to subsidy eligibility. The application raises two alarming issues, he said. What does HHS plan to do with all the information it collects on each applicant? And will pro-Obama groups like the AARP and Families USA, which might be tapped as navigators to sign people up to Obamacare, steer them to register as Democrats? Can you believe this? The hell? This isn't tyranny, then what the hell is it? What will they do with that data? Well, let's see. I'll tell you what they'll do with the data. My buddy Brian at The Right Scoop, a couple of days ago, he had a big story up there, which I've also been meaning to get to. And he points out extremist environmental activist groups filed a FOIA request with the Environmental Protection Agency and received private information, including home addresses, phone numbers, and emails on farmers all over the country. The concern is these activist groups will use this data to threaten or bully farmers. This is what they're going to do with the data. We already have evidence right here. The NCBA and the National Pork Producers Council are both furious with EPA for handing extremist groups illegally gathered data on farmers who operate confined animal feeding operations. The NCBA earlier this week was notified by the EPA that the agency had been collecting information from states on concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs. The information was requested by extremist groups, including Earth Justice, the Pew Charitable Trust, the Natural Resources Defense Council, through a FOIA request, and it was given to them. The information released by EPA covers livestock operations in more than 30 states, including many family farms who feed less than 1,000 head and are not subject to regulation under the Clean Water Act. The federal government demands the data when their left-wing buddies, with whom they conspire daily, seek the data. They give them the data, even though I can tell you, as a litigator, with respect to FOIA, among other matters, that data should have been accepted from the release by the EPA, but it wasn't. Representative Rick Crawford of Arizona confirms the same, and he sent a letter to the EPA signed by 40 congressmen. Hugo Chavez isn't dead, he's in the White House. And all of his cronies are spread throughout the federal government. Healthcare application, registering Democrats, collecting data. The IRS ballooned up. Its ranks have swelled. Going to police your health care. And Obama's off to immigration. Oh, we got to have comprehensive immigration reform, you know. Meanwhile, your policies, we've talked about this endlessly. The cost of your policies are going to go through the roof if you can keep them. Your health care is, in fact, going to fundamentally change. And even if you get to keep what you have, the deductibles are going to go through the roof. You want to know why? Not for your health care, because you're paying fat, bloated federal and state bureaucrats now to administer a fat, bloated program that has as its purpose to take money from you to pay for somebody else. This was never about improving your health care and your access to it. Never. This was never about reducing costs. Never. It's about stealing you blind. And now it's going to affect your health and your family's health. And what happens when they run out of money? Well, look overseas. What do you think happens? Your private property isn't so private anymore. Your private medical decisions aren't really your private medical decisions anymore. They have your hooks in their hooks in you, and their hooks in your wealth. Health laws family glitch leaves dependents without coverage, says left-wing Democrat moron Senator Wyden. Ron Wyden said millions of workers millions of workers' dependents will still be left without options for affordable The whole damn purpose of the law doesn't even exist anymore. Millions of workers' dependents won't have health care? Where's Obama tonight? Where's his schedule, Mr. Producer? What's he doing, interviews? He wake up around 11 o'clock? Can you send me his schedule? Man's very, very busy. Remaking America. On to immigration, ladies and gentlemen. He's pulled 4,000 patrol agents off the border. He lies about deportations. He comes back from his disastrous trip in the Middle East, and he demands that Congress, by mid-April, pass comprehensive immigration reform. You and I, we don't get to participate in this process, you see. The vast number of our representatives don't either. Like Obamacare, like Dodd-Frank, like the stimulus, like this, like that. This is not a republic. It's a post-constitutional America. I know some of my contemporaries. They cringe when I say this. They don't want to believe it. They still can have little socials and seminars and still go on their cruises and still show up on Fox. What's the problem? Their liberty isn't affected. Yes, our liberty is affected. We're transitioning, and quickly. Look at this from Reuters. Little hope seen for millions priced out of the health care overhaul. How did that happen? 18 million individuals and their families. Now, you know what this means, right, folks? You know what this means, right, Mr. Producer? Oh, what it means is Obama and the other status utopians, they're not going to step back and say, you know what, maybe we should reverse course, maybe we should really think about this. No, what they're going to say, if you've read Emeritopia, you know this. What they're going to say is, well, we haven't perfected the system. You know, these insurance companies are rip-offs. The rich, you know, they're not paying their fair share. We need to have better revenue sources and a better revenue stream. You know, we've got to do this. In other words, more government, a bigger police state, less liberty. That's right. It gets stronger and stronger. The iron fist gets bigger and bigger. We didn't pass what we wanted to pass, you know. We've got to do more. We've got to take more money in. That's going to be their answer. It's not to reverse course. It's to put their foot on the pedal and hit the gas and hit the wall harder and faster. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Mia, Miami, Florida, on the great Mark Levin app. How are you?
Maestro, how are you? I'm a 25 presenter calling from the Magic City.
Well, aren't you nice? How are you?
I'm doing fine. Mark, listen, here's the thing. I went to school.
Hold on. Talk into the mouthpiece. I'm losing you.
Okay. I went to Catholic school, so I understand that, you know, marriage is one of the sacraments. I fully understand that. However, you know, we live in a society where you, being an attorney, you know, everything has to do with legality. I have a partner of 8 years, and I'm fortunate right now that I am not working. However, she's a 10%er, and her company offers domestic partner health insurance, so we have health insurance. Unfortunately, mine is not pre-tax where hers is. And again, I understand what you're saying. I wouldn't want to change the definition of marriage, because then, knowing how the government is, they could start changing the definition of anything they want. And I wouldn't want that to happen, because I consider myself right of center. I mean, I'm a Tea Partier. I remember the whole health care issue. I was out there protesting and everything. I love this country. However, we've gotten to a society in where there's legal aspects in where I have to protect myself. For example, I've had surgery done. I had to have make up a medical surrogate, so then she could make decisions for me if I was not capable of doing it. In the future, let's say, if I were to die, I mean, I would have to write a will. I have no other alternative but to write a will, because if we would...
So what? I have a will, too. Big deal.
I understand, but for...
Hold on now. I have to get power of attorney. I have to do all these things. What's the big deal?
And it's not a big deal. I mean, people should have to protect themselves.
I'll tell you something else. You got single parents out there. You've got divorced folks out there. The tax laws are harmful to them as opposed to married people. I mean, I'm in a 40% tax bracket. Why should I be in a 40% tax bracket? Because I earn X, Y, Z, and they define it that way? Well, who are they to define me in a 40% tax bracket? This stuff goes on everywhere all the time.
I understand, but then there's also benefits when you are married, and I could understand why.
But a lot of people aren't married. A lot of people are divorced. I mean, there's a lot of single people running around out there. And I guess to some extent you're treated like that and you don't like it. But listen, I'm just saying that these things affect everybody in every way. I mean, for different reasons, by the way. But can I tell you something?
Go ahead.
You sound like a great lady. You're a Tea Party activist. You're a conservative. You know, you're struggling with these issues as a matter of principle, and that's okay. I'm going to send you a signed copy of Ameritopia. Don't hang up. We'll be right back.
Some hosts talk about the news. Mark Levin influences the news. Call the Mark Levin Show now at 877-381-3811.
John, our buddy in the country of Ireland, on the Mark Levin app. How are you, John?
Hey, Mark. How you keeping?
All right, my brother. Thank you.
That's good. Listen, thanks again for taking my call. Listen, I just wanted to just make a couple of quick points, and they're interlinked. It's regarding the gay marriage and conservatives. You've changed my life in the last couple of months, and you'll know why in the future. But one of the sayings, you've changed my whole outlook on life. Remember about a month or 6 weeks ago, you played the Reagan quote from the speech in the RNC in '92 about him appealing to your best hopes.
Yes, sir.
And it's changed my outlook, and that conservatives need to talk about the positivity, and that there's so many opportunities out there right now to, if you can't argue against this liberal mindset, like the stuff that's going on in New York, and talk about smaller government now, you're never, ever going to get the opportunity to do it again. Mm-hmm. And this gay marriage, if ever there was a case for the 10th Amendment, I don't know about your opinion, but this has to be the perfect thing. And that's the frustrating thing. No one is articulating this. I think there is such a lack of belief in the inner core of certain conservatives. Their core, they don't believe what they're saying. And it's so sad, because as hard as it is to look at the stuff that's going on, and it's so frustrating, it has to be an opportunity. Even because I speak to a lot of friends in New York, and I kind of go, and they're massive liberals. And I go, you're a liberal. Are you telling me you want someone telling you what soda you can buy? What eardrums you can listen to, what volume music. These are not core liberal principles. It's statism. And if you can't defeat it and speak out against it now, when are you ever going to do it?
Well, here's the thing. I agree with you. Here's the thing. The more you learn about conservatism, which is basically the promotion of our founding principles, the more you learn about this, the more you realize that the Republican Party as an institution is not representing those principles. They're not advancing them. They're not promoting them. They're not articulating them. You'll have a few come on my show or come on TV and so forth, but I'm talking about in the aggregate. And they don't fight for them. They're cowardly. They're defensive. And this is a big problem. The problem is not just having our strong positions, but effectuating them.
Absolutely, and but the thing is, like, you used to always say, we need a Reagan so badly, and I used to always just think it's just his record. But now I've studied him a lot over the last 6 weeks, and his actual listening to his speeches on YouTube, and it wasn't just his policies and his principle; it was the communication of it. That there was he was actually selling real hope that even Obama couldn't sell. That you can do anything. And that message, that if a conservative got up and was a leader and had that positivity and had that inner belief, that he had the belief in the message that he was saying, you could argue against so much of this stuff, because, like, I can tell you, yes, they're liberals, but there has to be.
I get it, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. You got to believe in the message in order to state the message, and we don't have as many people as we need to have in leadership positions to do it. I'll give you an example. And when I played some of this, I also talked about his first inaugural address, and I played part of that. And in his first inaugural address, Reagan repeatedly talked about the people, the people. See, where Obama tries to get on the side of the people, Reagan got on the side of the people. Reagan made it clear, I represent the people. They represent the government. I represent their best hopes. They are vanquishing their best hopes. You've got to express and advance who we are and expose who they are. Can you imagine Boehner or Cantor or any of these guys actually doing that, John?
No. And the funny thing
they need to go.
And the funny thing is, I don't know whether you'd agree with this, is the thing I've said to a few people, and I've got mixed reactions to it. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about the tyranny of the majority. I think right now we're going through a phase of the tyranny of the minority. And what I mean by that is the Supreme Court. The more
I think we're going through both. I think the election, where you saw majoritarianism there, I think the court, and the way I would put it is, we are rejecting republicanism, small r, not the Republican Party. I'm talking about republicanism. We are destroying the representative part of the republic. We are institutionalizing the soft tyranny of the left, whether it's in the unelected courts or the unelected bureaucracy. We have a political party in the Democrats doing something that would have been unheard of by the framers. When they win elections, they advance their cause. And what do they do when they're in the Senate and the House? They pass stuff like Obamacare, John. Why do they do that? Because they want to institutionalize an iron-fisted, centralized, top-down government. So when they lose elections, because they assume they won't win every single one, they'll never lose the policy.
Absolutely.
This is a huge problem for a republic. It's a huge puzzle that we have to deal with, because they use liberty against us. They use the representative process against us. While they're devouring both, they're advancing their cause. You know, very much like leeches, sucking the blood out of the body politic, and that's what they're doing.
Called them.
What's that?
He was so right. That's what Reagan called them, the leeches on society.
I didn't even know that. All right, Big John.
Can I just make one quick point, just because I heard Jeff Sessions earlier on? You know the way people don't like to say they're anti-something? The Republican Party, they're not anti-immigrants, they're pro-legal immigrants. And that's something that can sell
I think we've been saying that for years. The problem is, the problem isn't even a question of positioning right now. The problem is that we have a relative handful of masterminds who have decided how they want to handle immigration. They're operating in secret. They're working with some groups that they want to work with, but we, the people, are completely cut out of this. And I've had enough of it. No longer will I support any proposed law, any bill that doesn't have where the light of day isn't on it, and for a long period of time. God bless you, my friend. Call us again. That's Big John. You can see him on our Facebook site, Mark Levin Show. We have where John shows up, and he's a wonderful guy. Wonderful guy. Let's see here. I'm just looking. Listen, I'm no expert on the history of when marriage began. I can talk about the constitutional issues in some history, but it's just not something that I pretend to be an expert on, just for some of you calling. Sabrina, Shreveport, Louisiana, the great K-E-E-L, Keel. Go.
Hello, how are you today?
All right, my friend.
My first time ever calling you, and my husband said, call him, he'll listen to you.
All right.
The thing people aren't touching on is the price of medication. Within the past 3 months, we have had to rob Peter to pay Paul just for my medications. They have gone up 55%. My doctor is warning me. He said, Sabrina, if this pancreatitis gets any worse, I don't know what we're going to do. This Obamacare is not meant for sick people. He said, to people like you and other patients I have, my hands are tied. This is the absolute end.
Have you contacted that idiot senator of yours, Landrieu?
I wouldn't say anything polite or congenial to that idiot. I'm at a loss. This is not the America that my dad told me about. This is more like the USSR used to be. This is horrible.
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, I'm not trying to upset you, but we're definitely going to have rationing and price controls once prices go too high and long lines. It's going to be like people used to wait for meat and milk when they could get it in these other countries. It's just a matter of time. The dislocation that's being created already, I mean, this is such a monstrosity. It is such a disaster. And this jerk president, that's right, I said it, sends his kids to the Atlantis and the Bahamas. The wife goes off to Aspen with the kids. He goes to West Palm Beach. They're playing in Martha's Vineyard. He's having a grand old damn time on our nickel. And look at him. He's destroyed 1/7 of the damn economy, healthcare. He's destroying our immigration system. He's destroying our finances. And I got to sit here and listen to this guy go on and pretend that I have respect for him. I have no respect for him. Now, what do you think of that?
I think that's right. Nobody does. He's pathetic.
The drones do, and there's a lot of them. Thank you for your call, Sabrina. Oh, Mark what? I've had it up to here. It's disgusting what's happening to this country. Every time you turn around, you read another article, gun control, gotta have gun control. Gotta control school lunches and what your children eat. Have to control the mileage on your car. Have to control this. Banning and mandating and taxing and spending. What the hell? What the hell do we have here? Look at this. I look at the Hill newspaper. Democrat bill would expand the school lunch program to weekends and holidays. We're expanding the welfare state, as I say, while it's collapsing. The hell is it? Expand the school lunch program to weekends and holidays? I have a better idea. Just nationalize McDonald's. That's it. Give everybody free fries and hamburgers. That'll last about 3 weeks, then they'll all go under. These idiots. Marsha Fudge, Democrat, Ohio. Zoe Lofgren, Democrat, California. Terry Sewell, Democrat, Alabama. Tom Harkin, Democrat. All a bunch of left-wing kooks. School lunch program to weekends and holidays. Why, is school on weekends and holidays? Oh, for God's sakes. And listen to these idiots at Politico, these Washington Post has-beens or wannabes. The title of this story, on guns, has Washington waited too long? They're upset because we didn't have a massive gun control piece of law passed in violation of the Second Amendment on the heels of the slaughter in Connecticut. Gee, did we miss our opportunity? For the left, everything's an opportunity. The inhumanity on the left is just unbelievable. Unconscionable. Immoral. They just drive political advantage. Centralization of government. They have an affection for totalitarianism. They just do. It's in their DNA. Throw them a few crumbs. Here's a food stamp. Just vote for us, would you? Here's a visit to the doctor. Danny, Palm Beach, Florida, Sirius Satellite, go.
Yes, honored to talk to you, Dr. Levin. I mean, very intellectual program. Listen, I'm an Army colonel, retired and a surgeon here, and
God bless you.
I grew up in communism. Clearly, we have all the ingredients right now here for totalitarianism. You have a demagogue in the middle that will say anything he needs to say. That's Obama. Then you have the grab of the health care, which is the biggest grab of the power a country can have over their own people. Then you have indoctrination in schools and colleges of the new generation. And the only difference between this and Europe is that we have Second Amendment. And that stands because Second Amendment holds the other amendments up. That collapses, the whole system collapses, and you have totalitarianism. And if Americans don't wake up and see this, it's all lost. AMA, for example, they put a bunch of those drones in white coats sitting behind Obama when he was signing the healthcare law. I was a member of AMA. I got out. I urge everybody to get out of that stupid organization and a bunch of the other left-leaning organizations that medicine and who knows what else has. And this is how communism comes to power. That's how totalitarianism comes to power. The same ingredients were there during Hitler. The same ingredients were there during Stalin. The same ingredients were there during Tito's era. And I see them here. I've been here in America for 30 years, and I can't recognize the country. I'm a constitutionalist and a Reaganite, and I just can't believe what I'm looking at.
All right, Danny, thank you for your service, and thank you for your warning. We need it. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Mr. Producer, I must be very, very slow. I must be very, very dumb. It takes me literally at the least 12 months, but typically 16 months to write a book. Isn't that amazing? And when I'm writing the book, I have to write it after the program and do my research so I can do it till 2 and 3 in the morning. Or get up at 6 in the morning. Typically, I do both. So I can prep for the program, work with my legal foundation, and do my research and study for the book and do the other things that I do with family and so forth. Virtually every weekend is spent researching and writing. And then rewriting and editing, and adding and subtracting. And it goes on for a long, long time. I don't even know that it's particularly healthy, to be honest with you. So how is it, Mr. Producer, that some hosts, one in particular who shall go nameless, can co-write, quote unquote, 3 books in 12 months and travel all the time and do shows? How is that possible?
That's a good question.
I conclude that I must be slow or dumb. Because I don't know how you can travel most weekends and be so prolific in your research and your writing and all these other things. I just don't know. And I'm not picking on anyone in particular. I just don't know how they do it. They're like superhuman. Because we all know they write their own books. Jeff, Champaign, Illinois, you have 1 minute. The great WIBQ. Go.
Hi, Mark. I don't understand why no one has brought this up, at least not to my ears. And you're a constitutional lawyer. Why is it that we, the people, cannot get this on the ballot, get Obamacare on the ballot to remove it?
All right, my friend, I have to go. The reason is it's not in the Constitution. We don't believe in direct democracy. On the other hand, we don't believe in this form of tyranny either, do we? All right, my friends, tomorrow's another day. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel. America, I'm off to write, and I'll see you tomorrow. I'm Mark Levin.